John. Welcome to Maxim Foods Inside Track. Beautiful autumn day here in Brisbane. Chilly mornings, but yeah, look at the sunshine. It's a great time of the year in Brisbane. Let's have a look at the market. Despite quite a bearish global sentiment on dairy commodities, it was a really positive result last night on GDT, especially with whole milk powder. So whole milk powder was up 5%, which was against sort of global expectations. The futures market did expect or did predict a bit of an uptick, and it was quite a solid increase across all the contracts out through till October, November. So it did show that buyers are seeing value in the market at the moment. Southeast Asia were back and have been quiet in previous auctions. North Asia, China solid again in this auction. So promising signs of demand, and obviously supply side of things out of NZ will taper off into the winter months. So yeah, it was a good sign. Is it a real sign of market direction? We don't know as of yet, but obviously people are seeing good value in buying at the moment, and are dipping in and buying, which is great. Moving across to skim milk powder, there was 1.5% jump last night on the GDT. This was a bit imbalanced. There was some really red hot demand for the first contract in June at 8.5% uplift, which means that obviously people are still buying quite hand to mouth. 30% of that volume on last night's auction was bought by the EU, which is unprecedented. In the US side of things, it's been a rocky road for non-fat commodities, but we have seen a steady incline on the CME over the last couple of weeks, which shows that there might be some support behind non-fat in the US. In Australia and New Zealand, yeah, obviously a positive result last night. People obviously seeing some good value like whole milk in the short term. It's below 5-year averages, so they're dipping in and buying. But once again, hard to tell any sort of market direction. We still have a relatively bearish outlook on skim milk powder. Having a look at butterfat, if we could go through the regions in the US, we've seen positive uptick on the CME for butterfat in the last 2 to 3 weeks, which is promising. Good solid demand, things seem reasonably balanced over there. In the EU, things remain quite flat. Retail demand quite flat as well. So yeah, for a reasonably steady outlook for EU butter over the next 2 to 3 months. If we look closer to home, New Zealand, Australia, we've had some 2 to 3 consecutive positive results on GDT on butterfat. It seems to be, I guess, the champion of the commodities at the moment. So with less supply coming into the end of the season out of New Zealand, we should see butterfat hold up in the next 2 to 3 months. Probably the most bearish global conditions at the moment would be around whey, lactose and the proteins side of things. So obviously good cheese production out of the US, or good milk production, meaning good cheese and whey production. So supply is quite plentiful and demand has been reasonably quiet globally. So we have seen protein prices taper off. There's good demand of good supply of lactose globally, which has really put a floor on pricing, and whey powder similar, reasonable supply and demand reasonably soft. So not a very positive outlook over the next 2 to 3 months or short term of lactose and whey. Proteins, you know, this may be the floor because it's reasonably good value at the moment given the last 18 months. So we might see a bit of an uptick in proteins, however whey and lactose remain reasonably bearish. Finishing off with cheese, so in the EU we've seen some good recovery from pricing after a pretty negative last 2 to 3 months. Some solid export demand from North Asia and Southeast Asia for EU product. In the US things are a little more volatile. We've seen a reasonably steady pricing over the last 2 to 3 months or a good balance of supply and demand. We've seen a good increase in milk in the US, so increase in cheese production and a decrease in export demand. So things have been reasonably volatile in the last, especially in the last 2 weeks on the CME market. So it's a bit unsure or a bit unclear as to what the future holds for US cheese in terms of market direction, but there is value in it at the moment. In Australia and New Zealand, yeah, it's been promising demand, especially in Australia for retail and food service. Despite some economic pressures, as we all know, the cheese pricing has held up quite well. So we see a reasonably balanced Australian-New Zealand market and cheese pricing to remain reasonably firm in the short term. Thanks very much for listening to today's Inside Track. Look forward to seeing you again next fortnight.